Is December 28th, 2021, and I am Brian Foster, and we're talking about Spiritism today. Today, we're going through Chapter 6 in the book Through the Mist. It's a free PDF. I have a link to it down in the description below. It's called A Magnetic Chorale. Before we begin, let's have a short prayer. Thank you, Jesus. Please, in this holiday season, let us increase our love and let us spread our love and caring and fraternity and charity to everyone around us, to our family, our extended family, and people we meet just on the streets and as we go through daily life. Let us learn the gift that we can give, and we find more value in service to others than in receiving goods ourselves. Amen. So, before I begin with the book, if you would like to learn about Spiritism, I suggest that you read the Spirits book by Allan Kardec, codified by Allan Kardec, I should say. He got that information from many spirits organized by the Spirit of Truth. He was not a medium. He organized a series of 1,019 questions and gave them to multiple mediums throughout Europe and did not codify the answers unless they were the same or similar. I know a lot of people read a lot of information and books by mediums who've channeled one spirit. I believe that the Spiritist literature, where you find various spirits all organized by Jesus Christ and giving us this third revelation called Spiritism, Christian Spiritism, is giving us a more complete and truer picture of the spirit world. Although these other ones give us really good pictures too. In fact, it's the one I'm going to read to you, chapter 6 tonight, also gives us a very good and detailed and corresponds very greatly with Spiritism. The other book I suggest that you look at, of course, in the Spirits book, you can buy that on Amazon, but you can also buy that, you can also get that free. Download on PDF. Just type in Allan Kardec space PDF and you will find it on any search engine. The other book I would recommend is my book, Spiritism 101, The Third Revelation. That you can download in PDF version on my blog site, nwspiritism.com. It's also in PDF. It's in PDF. It's also in paperback, Kindle, and in Audible. And in Kindle, it's cost only like 99 cents. I made it the least price as possible. Let's begin. Let me bring up the chapter 6, A Magnetic Chorale. Let me hide the shown items so you can see everything. Okay, now before this chapter, our spirit who wished to remain nameless, but people have called him Fred. He woke up in heaven. He saved this child. Well, tried to save this child. He didn't really. In the middle of the road, this is at the end of the 19th century, he was killed. He and the child were killed immediately by carriages, horse-drawn carriages going back and forth. They did not know that, did not experience any pain. He woke up on this grassy knoll looking down on this kind of foggy, veil that people came out of, and he knew that those were people coming over from the physical world to the spirit world. And he was given and sent on his way and talked to different spirits. And now he's kind of on this convalescent area where people go to rest after they've come over from the other side. An amazing thing about the other side is, and when you die, you are who you are. He didn't experience this fantastic physical metamorphosis. He his character, he wasn't sure he was dead, but then he finally figured it out. Of course, he was helped. So this chapter is called A Magnetic Chorale. I'll start reading. As we walked along, my attention was attracted by the chiming of a peal of bells in the distance, and simultaneously an irresistible fascination seized upon me, momentarily increasing, until at length I felt as if was being impelled forward by some invisible but tangible influence to accept the invitation from those rhythmic tongues were issuing far and wide. What that influence was, or how it obtained such a mastery over me, I could not tell. And even now, with more extended experience of this life, I am unable to explain. So let me kind of go through in Spiritism, bells and music and all sorts of other phenomenon can send messages to you. In fact, there was a talk in one of the Spiritist books by this fountain that would send out music, but it also announced that we're going to have a meeting of the community. If you'd like to come, it's, at this time. And so these, of course, when you live in this logical universe, you can get information via data coming to you, by people talking to you, by thoughts coming to your mind, by pictures coming to your mind. It is, you are in this whole new rich, amazingly rich world. And that's why I think Spiritism is so valuable, because it's preparing you for when you do pass on the other side. You're on this physical planet. This is just a temporary planet for you to improve your personality and your character. So I suggest you get with that program if that interests you. And then when you're in the spirit world, it's an entirely new being. It's not out of the realm of familiarity, because they keep it so you can understand what's going on and you have some sort of familiarity. But the more you learn, the more you can exercise your power. I'll carry on. The sensation produced was novel, entrancing, and indescribable. Its operation seemed to permeate my whole being and to exert itself equally from within as without. Neither was it due entirely to my recent arrival, for I perceived it had the same effect upon my guide as upon myself. See, again, he's proving what Spiritist literature and Spiritist guided spirits have told Spiritist mediums, that these things communicate to us. By some accountable process, I translated the voice of those bells into appeal for help and assistance, which I alone had the power to render. And though I had no inclination to hasten in obedience to call, I was certain that it would not be right to delay. But why should it be me? Was a question I put myself again and again. I was entirely ignorant of everything surrounding me. Why was not the summons to many others walking in the same direction, gathering, as it were, from every visible point of the compass? And as I thus queried, I scanned the faces of those nearest to me and became convinced that they too were moving under the impulse of that same mysterious power. This discovery served to further increase my interest and excite my imagination as to what the result and explanation would be. So here we have bells that are sending, not overt messages, subtle messages that are going through logical pathways that he doesn't see yet because he hasn't understood his own ways of communication. We carry on. My companion saw and no doubt fully understood the perplexity I was enduring, but when I turned and would have thought the interpretation, he merely smiled and my tongue was silent. So we went forward in obedience to the one impulse attracting us both by its strange magnetic power. Presently, another source of gratification was afforded to me. As through the trees, I began to catch in the distance broken glimpses of a stately pile of buildings which were steadily approaching. Hitherto, I had only seen such as I looked across that boundless landscape under the direction of Usamos. But now it was evident I would have the opportunity of inspecting one of the homes of paradise at close quarters. With this, a pleasing spasm of excitement seized me as I involuntarily asked myself, would this be my home? A question I at the same time answered in the negative, but how I know not. Unless it was by the power of revelation, which is so natural, and yet so infability, a part of our personality in this life. Therefore, I ceased to speculate on the ownership of the home and prepared to examine its character as soon as circumstances would allow of my doing so. So again, what is happening? He's getting all these subliminal messages. And then when he thinks about things, he says, will that be my home? And then somehow he knew, like, the answer is no. So since he's new to this part of heaven, it may be that he is being watched very carefully and that there are higher spirits guides. As soon as he has questions in his mind, he's given the feelings and intuition of what the answers are to make him feel more comfortable during his first hours and days in heaven. So let me carry on. Immediately, we reached the open plain, the center and crown of which it occupied. I intuitively knew that I was looking upon the home of rest. So again, it may be the person he's walking with, who I think is in charge of the home of rest, giving him this information very subtly. our sanatorium, in the grounds of which I enjoyed my refreshing and rejuvenating sleep. As the physiognomy of a man affords a certain index to his character and dispositions, so the contour of this home declared at once its nature and purpose. At a glance, I saw it was a citadel of repose, a fortress of rest, an ambuscade of joy to every soul that came that way, stately and grand in its unassuming magnificence, as if its foundations were laid deep down within the eternal calm of God's omnipotence, pure and unsullied in its fabric as the infinite and changeless love of its divine designer. Every stone and feature apparently throbbing with the spirit of mercy and forgiveness which hovered around. I felt, as I gazed upon it, that I in some manner had solved the mystery of that profound attraction by which I've been drawn toward such a desirable center. Reverence, gratitude, worship, and all seemed to be the janitors who stood as guards, as the four towers which rose at the terminating points of its stately porticos. And again, Spiritism tells us that buildings are made, and in fact, they will um, emanate feelings of the people who created them. So if a group of spirits created it and said, this is going to be a house of rest, we want people to be comfortable here, we want people to be relaxed, the building will emanate these waves of calmness and being comfortable and rest, and the spirit world will actually make these places, even for they will make like spas is probably a good word to say, that will help spirits who have gone on missions down to earth, which is not easy because you have to go down to earth where they have to make themselves more dense so they can be amongst spirits down here on the earth, which is called the lower zone, which is from the crust of the earth to the bottom of the first level of heaven. It's very hard because they're surrounded by bad thoughts, dark thoughts, by pride, envy, selfishness, hate, anger, whatever. And when they come back, they will be given in places kind of like this, and they'll have water therapy, they'll have sound therapy, they'll have light therapy, things to relax the spirit, because they say this is like going down deep into the ocean with and as you go deeper into the water, right, you have more and more weight upon you, and your ability to communicate harder and harder, right? So, and just think of that, going down to that ocean as a spirit who's been in this beautiful land, and you go to earth surrounded by these dark creatures who are us humans, because we don't reflect the love of God as much. We've got the darker auras, and then the thoughts going through, because thoughts go through everyone, right? A thought goes out throughout the universe and comes back again. Every thought is recorded. That's why within our life, every thought, and I mean every thought. So it's not like we were told as children, like, this, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. Well, it's even worse than that. Is don't think, if you can't think nice, think something else. And that's what we're here, and that's what I really encourage people to do, is to rewire your thoughts and your brain so you are prepared not to engage in malicious gossip. Don't look at someone and say, oh, that person's ugly and terrible, and I don't like the cut of their jib, right? Just say, oh, okay. Or if you see someone on the streets passed out or begging, just say, oh, God bless you, I hope you've been through a hard trial. Try not to think negative about them. Now, do I do that? Am I perfect? No, I'm not. But I'm trying every day to instill a habit, and it takes years to do this. I mean, don't think you're going to change overnight. And if you can, God bless you, because you're superior to me. Okay, let me carry on. So much of the building was visible from where we stood. For me to wonder at and admire its beauties was undoubtedly a hall of enormous proportions. It shaped that of an amphitheater. Three sides were flanked by a spacious piazzas of equal length. I'm pronouncing that wrong. Somehow I can't remember how to pronounce piazza, of equal length, carrying out the design to a perfect square, the corners being occupied by four towers, which served the purpose of entrances to the hall. The style of the architecture was composite. The columns supporting the roof of the porticos were Corinthian, the material more resembling ivory than marble. The planks upon which they rested were of pinkish alabaster and massive enough to form the cornerstones of pyramids. But whereas the Egyptians would have left a sphinx like blank upon their faces, these were paneled with exquisite bas reliefs, such as the Grecians loved to carve. The pediments were used as galleries for groups of statuary, in the contemplation of which the convalescent inmates of home might learn progressive lessons of the life to which they have been called. In that self illumined atmosphere, which offered no faculty for the birth of shadows, from the distance at which I stood, the walls of the hall happened to be appeared to be built of stone of a delicate and variable shade of green. I afterward discovered that this effect was produced by a magnificent screen of elaborately carved and perforated marble, draped around the hall in folds as exquisite and soft as lace, through which the foliage of a noble vine was visible. The towers rose to considerable heights, terminating the minarets like polished silver, from which the bells chimed forth their music, and crowning the hall rose a majestic dome, serving the double purpose of completing design and lighting the interior. So imagine all of this beautiful edifice, and with these different uh, materials and different designs, and marbles like perforated like lace. All of this was created by thought. So put that in your mind for a second. All of it was created by thought. No, there was no stonecutter that chiseled bit by bit. What happens are a group of spirits get together and they go, okay, what do we want to build? And they'll usually create like a model of that, right? So they can all have the same idea in their mind of what it should look like. And they will come together and they will start creating the outside of this through their minds. And they use universal fluid, which is fluid that creates, and by their thoughts, they will combine that in vibrations and density. They'll combine that into whatever material or composite of different materials they want. And they'll create the outside edifice. They usually have a higher spirit come and say, okay, yeah, that looks good. Oh, let's make some changes here. That's none of the symmetry is not right. Then they will finish the inside and they'll put all the different things in the inside. And they may have artists come in, sculptures, whatever, and they will think of a sculpture and they will put the sculptures in to where they want to be. And a lot of the art, in fact, I've read arts and other spiritualist literature, is they'll, like on these bas reliefs, right, where you've got, if you look at the as the Greeks did, and then the Roman columns, right, with all the the scenes of the fields and maybe soldiers marching, whatever. You can see them and they'll be moving, and you can actually see them and they will look like people. They'll be moving. They'll be, if there's a scene, they said there's one thing of a scene of a farmland. You can see the cows munching the grass in the fields. It's like our LCD advertisements now, right? Where you see, it's not like it used to be where they would put paper up on a billboard. Now it's a billboard moves, right? So the same thing, these things can move, and it'll be the artist that will show them. So now think what it takes to do that with your mind. And that's what you go through when you are in the lower levels of heaven. You go to schools and colleges and you learn how to work with your mind. And now and you go through, each level of heaven has this level of colleges, and you don't graduate until you understand what you're supposed to understand. And you also have to have increase your spiritual maturity, which means you're calm and kind and generous in every circumstance. So that's why and this is the reason why you go back and you're incarnate on earth, is so you can make it so your mind is always calm and cool under the horriblest conditions. Now, you can say, well, how many people can do that on earth? Well, the answer is not many, because we're still a planet of atonement. But as we go through life after life, we will get better and better and able to do that. And as Chico Xavier said, only about 30% of the people on earth will actually rise to heaven. Now, that should go quite higher in the near future. Okay. Let me go back and read. The wonderful Oppositeness of every feature of the scene to each other was again impressed upon me, art and nature being blended in such a manner as to enrich the harmony. That garden-like plain, so artistically dotted with flowers and shrubs, would have been half voided of its beauty had that noble structure not been there. And let me stop there. So that garden, those hallways, the marble, the flowers, and the shrubs, they'll never decay. On Earth, there's something called time, and time marches on, right? We get older. We have a wood house, the wood decays. You know, if there's marble, people walk on the marble, that you'll see people's footprints over the centuries. But in the spiritual plane, it's there. In fact, if you take one of those flowers and you pluck the flower and you put it in the vase, it will look perfectly good until you no longer think about that flower, and then it will just fade away. There's no rottenness. There's no, something you have to throw away. It's all logical structures. It's all created by this huge database, this universal database. And so if you think of a flower, it creates the data structure of a flower, and then your spirit, which is an encapsulation of your personality, interprets that data as the flower, and you see the flower. And it's not that different to what we are now. I mean, people think, oh, what are we, just mindless AI? Well, no, think of what you are right now. Your eyes, imperfectly, I might note, looks at an object. It interprets that object into data for your brain. It's seamless for us. But, if you're looking at a picture, that picture does not go into your brain. That picture is interpreted by, by different bits of information into your brain, in which you then you recreate that picture in your mind. The same thing happens in the spirit world. The data is there. It says it's a flower. You look at that, you automatically, without thought, interpret that data as a flower. The nice thing about that is that nothing decays. Okay. Where was? Oh, and as for the hull, it needed that flower bejeweled mantle of a lawn as a fit setting whereupon to display its matchless perfection. Blended together, the beauties of each were emphasized, while the movements of the multitude kept the balance of the harmony swinging. Kushna, that's the one who's been working with him, moved forward, and I, enraptured with the scene and wondering what this next development would be, mechanically followed until I became conscious that it was not his intention to enter by any of the approaches visible to me. Then for a moment I wavered, as all my soul called me within that place, and I was doubtful whether he was not leading me elsewhere. In an instant, he divined my difficulty. So he's been reading his mind, right? So remember, as we are spirits, even on earth, even as physical beings, I should say, these spirits, low, high, indifferent, whatever, our mind's an open book. Our thoughts go out. They read our thoughts. The higher the spirit, the more they can actually see us, and they can actually know some of our future. Because when you see in the spirit world, you see a person, you see some of his past, present, and future, because there's no time. So time is part of the landscape. It's part of that dimension. And that's why when you dream, it's like you don't understand a lot of things. So that's why a lot of it is there's just like this confusing nonsense in your mind. A lot of it's because you're confused when you come in and out of your physical body, but a lot of it is that you see these things where a table that, as it was created, is it now as it will be in the future, for instance. It's something it's alien to you, and that's why your dreams are your mind can only, and your physical mind can only interpret it so well, and of course, as you know, your mind tries to put it in a slot you understand. It's a lot like I read this wonderful passage. I forgot who wrote it. So when the Indians of the New World first saw the ships of people coming over to here, they had no idea the size of these ships, and they looked at that and they thought, well, those are like dark clouds. They did not have an understanding because their mind, they knew canoes, but anything bigger than that, the answer is no. And they just did not interpret that as ships were men were aboard. And so in their mind, they in mind interpret it as clouds. The same thing we are. We may interpret something as water or who knows, of some sort of Uncle Bob, and it actually was something completely else. Okay. In an instant, I'll carry on. In an instant, he divined my difficulty and appeared to be by no means displeased thereat. But assuring me he was about to enter, he led me to the main portion of the building, before hidden from my sight, which formed the temporary abode of those who tarried at this home for rest and recuperation. At that moment, the bell ceased to ring, and I was glad when, without attempting to show me the numerous apartments opening on every hand, he motioned me to follow him along a corridor which led in the direction of the hull. At the end, drawing aside a richly embroidered curtain, he ushered me at once into what I may legitimately call the arena. So I described the scene which met my sight. It was a mountain of faces on every side, and over and around us an atmosphere of unbroken peace. I was conscious that it had reached a goal. A period of uncertainty lay behind me. For the time, I felt satisfied and drew a deep breath of relief at having accomplished something. I knew not what, but my heart was glad. And again, this is a feeling that you have when you're in heaven. You feel content, you feel glad, you feel happy. And this is a clue, too, when you try and interpret your own dream. If you've been in an area of heaven or talking to high spirits, you feel good. If you've been in the lower zone and you've been like chased or even, just talking to someone and you feel stressed or unhappy or frightened, then you've been in a lower area. So that's a way of kind of getting a clue about your dream. And in fact, people's near-death experiences, NDEs, they were told, this one lady who experienced her near-death experience, and she'd been told some of her future and went over what her mission on life was, just to make sure she understood the importance of it. And then she wanted to hug one of the high spirits, and the high spirit said, no, don't hug me. If you hug me, you feel so good you don't want to go back. So he said, no, you better not. And so that kind of tells you something, does it not? Okay, I'll carry on. The flower-carpeted floor of that spacious arena contained a number of lounges composed of various aromatic mosses, soft as air, each one designed to produce its own peculiar effect magnetically. Krishna drew my attention to the different odors they exhaled and invited me to throw myself upon them to test their comfort. And as I complied, briefly explained that magnetism is the strength and nourishment of the spiritual body. Now, they use magnetism like for energy and focused, and then sometimes they use electricity, but they say magnetism, which is really energy, which within the law of affinity kind of attracts things like it or puts out information that they want to put out. Then he led me to a vacant seat and left me in charge of a friend who, he said, would interpret the chorale to me. The choral. I'm not doing too good today. Sorry. Rapidly, that spacious auditorium was filling up its seats. Tier after tier, rising one above another, contributed to that sea of faces upon every one of which happiness had set her name in living characters. From each of the four entrances, a steady stream poured in until the hall was full, ceasing when just one seat remained for the last who entered. The dresses worn were of many colors, but only of the lighter shades, all serving to make the groupings as picturesque as they were varied. The lower seats were filled by children wearing robes of spotless white, or tints of the almost unimaginable delicacy. Some of the wearers being of such tender age as to make me wonder how they were kept in the quiet order which everywhere prevailed. Behind these, so there are children in heaven. And you can ask, why are there children in heaven? And the answer is some people who had died maybe in the womb or a very young age will be allowed to regrow and remature in the spirit world. And I believe, I've not read this directly, this is my interpretation, that they, instead of being put right back to their adult age, they're allowed to do that in order to help shape their character and personality for the better. Their previous life or lives may have not have made the effect they wanted. Therefore, they were given a little bit of a reboot so they could be raised as children to help modify their character. Behind these, the thousands of youths and maidens were arranged according to some method I did not understand. Above these again were women in greater proportions still, and finally rank after rank of men to the outer edge of the wide circle. Every nation upon the earth had its legitimate representation in that throng, and all were so disposed that each complexion added its own influence to the balance of the picture. But the most pleasing thought of all was that every voice would say, Our Father, to the self-same God, and feel at heart that they were members of one family. The Jew was not conscious of election. The Gentile lost his hatred. The caste restriction of the Brahmin was broken down. The hand of the Arab was no more against his fellow. The Hindu woman had doffed her veil. The Mohammedan had lost his bigotry. Greek and Roman thought not of deadly feuds. The hand of the Zulu held no assaje. The Indian had no tomahawk, while the Christian had seized his sword. Romanists and Protestants gave their preference to each other. The Episcopalian boasted of no apostolic succession, and the narrow-minded sectarian sat side by side with the Wilhelm atheist, whom he had before consigned fire eternal. In such a multitude, it was such bonding united them, I could fancy I was not very far removed from the inner shrine of heaven. And again, this is what Spiritism tells us. And he must have been he was not in the lower areas of heaven, because their sectarianism is still there, because people haven't gotten the spiritual maturity to know that all that is unimportant. But as you go higher and higher into levels of heaven, you understand we're all one people. And he said he had all the races, everything. And in fact, sometimes people in the levels of heaven around the earth will actually be of different colors, the colors that they want to be, or are shades of colors they were in other planets what they remembered fondly. So again, in heaven, you're immortal. Your body doesn't decay. You don't have any health problems, and you look as your mind makes you look. So if you're 70 years old when you die, usually what happens is you start looking how you want to look. You could be looking in your 20s, 30s, 40s, or if you're 20 when you die and you're used to looking more like in your 30s or 40s from previous lives, then you become that. And that's why you understand to release the bonds of all these petty differences we have on Earth. Now, why do we have petty differences on Earth? Why are there so many races? Why are there so many castes? Why are there so many religions? Well, it's all part of the chaos on Earth to put us in different situations, to teach us things, to atone for what we've done wrong in the past, and to teach us that these things are not as important as we think. And if we did not see them, if we grew up in this perfect environment, we would not be able to modify our character and personality to rip out these primitive emotions that we have inside us, because we came from more primitive organisms and primitive humans. We wouldn't rip them out. We accept it, but if something important happened to us, or the drama or something shocked us, we would resort to our primitive emotions. Here we're actually taking them out bit by bit from the foundation of our heart. It can be difficult. These trials and tribulations on earth are not easy, but it is an effective arena. This is an effective campus to knock those things out of us. It's not simple. I'll carry on. Was it the association in which I found myself that started such a train of reflection in my mind? I know not. Perhaps never shall know, but it afterwards resolved itself into an impromptu symphony, introducing that never to be forgotten chorale, I should say. I had scarcely reached its termination before the keynote sounded. In common with those around me, I raised my eyes to the dome, where a dove of tintless electric brilliance poised itself on an outstretched wing, as if to hush the tremor of its rapid flight. In its beak it held something which flashed and blazed with a glory that pelled the lustre of its character, and added perceptibly to the hollow light which bathed the hall. With one impulse, but without a sound, these thousand rose and bowed their heads in reverent adoration. And when the silence had been hushed into an awful calm, the quickened sense of the soul could almost hear that jewel fluttered on the air, and like a flash of lightning dying from her sight, the dove had disappeared. Steadily, as a bubble on the air becalmed, that brilliant globule floated, gradually falling in the center of that vast concourse of worshippers. Down, slowly down, enlarging as it fell, it gained still greater brilliancy by expansion. I watched it with bated breath, wondering when we should sound the depth of its self inspiring awe, until at length, bursting with a soft detonating chime, it threw a proportion of its crystal spray on every head within that audience, that which lingered through the service like a jewel sent to flash God's blessing upon his children gathered there. Now, so he had seen this show of this globe coming there, comes out, and all these like crystals come and touch everybody. I have read so many different uh, stories of different brilliant shows created by spirits, and they would have spirits come and they'd be in the air, and there'd be a high spirit, maybe somebody even like Jesus. They'd be surrounded like a circle around him in the air by his ministers, and ministers could be Socrates, and the spirit would say, Jesus was always unique looking. He was that combination of male and female love and caring, of competence, everything. And then each of his ministers had their own unique look, right? And that's because they've been through the same process, but more of than we have. It all creates this unique carving of their face, of their presence, of their character. And it's just wonderful. And then they would have these shows. They'd have these colors. They'd have these things rain down. They would have, in this one description where people were graduating, they had this like river of liquid gold come down and go down to the plain from these people were up on high, and it would flood everyone's feet, and then the color would just come as they were standing, would just go through the legs and fill their whole body into colors. And some people, the people who were graduating, the other people, the colors would fade, but the people who were graduating, the colors would stay, and there was like a crown of 11 stars around their head. So these things, think of it. If you can create with your mind, and you can create whatever you want out of this universal fluid, and out of this great, mass of data, and the ability to have actions with thought, think of what you're going to see. It will. I mean, what you're going through on Earth is worth every piece of pain and struggle, and I know that's easy for me to say, and it's hard in action. So absolutely. Okay, let me carry on. 7 bars of silence intervened, and then the opening strains of the first chorus fell upon my ears. The theme commenced with a pianissimo number in a unison of male magnetisms, for in that chorale there was not one articulate sound. I looked, and from the heads of the men saw crimson rays emitting, which, darting towards the center of the dome, blended with each other, formed in circles of various sizes, and began to gyrate in the room. The movements called vibrations of deeper or higher tones, according to the size of each circle and the speed with which it moved. The effect of this blending of the bass and tenor was like the muffled music of the ocean's roll when heard from some distant inland hill. The melody was too sweet to set to words without detracting from its cadence, and yet, as I listened to its holy inspiration, its greatest charm being the perfect unison of such diverse nations, religions, and tongues, I felt that heaven has accomplished a triumph in the setting to such music the immortal poem of Israel's sweetest singer, and that I was listening to a challenge to earth and heaven to behold how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. And we've been told the same thing by the Reverend G. Val Owen's mother, that when the music hits you, it's not like you're listening. It's the music penetrates your whole soul. It makes you calm and peaceful and in harmony. And some music can do that to us here on earth, which is wonderful. The invitation issued, and the gamut of their variations being exhausted, the circles ceased their flight, met, embraced, and finally spread themselves as a canopy across the dome. So again, this is all done by thought. All the people that are singing had this. Okay, this is they rehearsed this. They said, okay, this is what our thought. We're going to send these sparks of light up here. Then they're going to meet, and then they're going to spread over the whole arena. Then succeeded a duct of the blue and amber offerings of the youth and maidens, rising in the volume of its gradual crescendo, the sweeps of blue soprano and curves of amber contralto, walking sweet echoes with the declaration. It is like the precious ointment upon the head that ran down to the beard, even to Aaron's beard that went down to the skirts of his garment. At this point, the women joined the rose-tinted pulse throbs of a second soprano to swell the trio. As the dew of Hermon, and as the dew which ascended upon the mountains of Zion. Then the full chorus pealed, 1,000 children contributing the brilliance of their untinted music as the canopy of circles reformed and moved to lend their deep foundation to the strain. It sounded like a choir of angels singing, and with the voice of far distant thunders, and heaven's own burden serving as a double bass to the orchestra of the heavens roll. All harmonies above and beneath, around, and with all the chords and voices nature can command, being represented in the universal confirmation. For there the Lord commanded his blessings, even life forevermore. And in fact, on Sunday when I went over, when a group of medium and from the Spiritist Review of 1858 talked to the Spirit uh, Mozart, he was saying that even nature gives the background music in these higher level planets. So as we become a planet of regeneration and then a happy planet, and as we go higher and higher with less chaos, less evil, and we don't have to go through these hard trials, we will bathe in the sea of love and tranquility and harmony. I'll carry on. The chorus swelled around us with such majestic force and intensity that every color flashed its echo to enhance the glory, until the hall was bathed with the perfume of thanksgiving, then gathering over the arena as the final beat of the last bar was reached. A harmony of shades, as sweet as that of sound, was formed, and the cloud ascended as an offering of gratitude for our Father's love. The dome was not let clear of that prismatic cloud before a chord of even sweeter music fell upon our ears, and I perceived that the jewels on our head were chiming in the acceptance and amen of God. Up to this point, Kushna, the one who met him at the sanatorium, had assumed the directorship from the center of the arena, being surrounded by a number of young men and women who moved in graceful order with the rhythm of the music, as if engaged in working out some figure in a mystic dance. On making inquiry, I was informed that this chorus was but an introduction to the ceremony, sung aid those special attendants in producing a suitable magnetic condition into which to introduce the patients. And looking intently in obedience to the wish of my instructor, I saw that all the magnetisms had not ascended. Some had been distilled, shall I say etherealized, and filled the arena like the least suspicion of a cloud. So again, when he says he's saying magnetism, these are like visions of color and clouds and so forth. And of course, etherealized is really what we use now more. That when you're a spirit, you are etherealized. You are less dense, and therefore, and of course, you're not affected. You can be less dense. You need less, less food and sustenance and energy because there's no gravity pushing you down. And every time you walk, you're using up calories. And none of that. And fill the arena like the least suspicion of a cloud. And yet it was not a cloud, since such a designation conveys the idea of an unsubstantial vapor, which could have been carried hence upon the arms of motion. This had weight and body through which the attendants moved to and fro as bathers move through shallow water, with the exception that this scarce visible something seemed to offer no resistance. Here is a metaphor which will convey the idea of what it seemed to be. It was like the specter of a lake, which in its restless wanderings had to conjure to pause for a time, that the spirits of some children of mortality might bathe therein and wash the last traces of the earth away. My attention was here called to a man who entered the hall from the corridor through which I came. His tall and stalwart form, with clothes in a robe of electric gray, over which he wore a flowing mantle of blue, lined with amber and gorgeously embroidered from his loins downward. His face, complexion, and general bearing reminded one of an Arab sheik, except that his haughtiness was here replaced by calm humility. Around his head, waist, and wrist and ankles, he wore circlets of some strange amalgam set with gems that emitted rays of light, thereby forming six circles of halo, which invested him with some mysterious power. And again, in the spirit world, we are told that you can, by looking at the gems a person's wearing and the color of their robes, many times, I don't know for all, but you can tell what level of heaven they're in and kind of what group they work for. As he stepped into arena, a flash of welcome greeted him from that immense assembly. He glanced around the hall, just as a skilled conductor will survey his orchestra to see if all is ready for the baton's wave, reaching reaching the point where Krishna awaited him. He merely bowed his head, at which the attendants turned and left the hall by the passage at which he had entered. Here I took the opportunity to ask, "Who is this?" "Siamides, the magnetic adept who will conduct the chorale." So I'll stop there and we will carry on in our next Tuesday uh, uh, live stream. So again, here at the same time, please subscribe and ring the bell so you'll be notified when I do talk through the mist. Now, of course, you can download Through the Mist on PDF. I have a link to it in my description down below. And also, if you want to understand, and some of the things I'm saying to you, or I kind of go through too fast, or I talk about logical and encapsulated concepts, and is I would suggest you read my book, The Spirit Realm. It really kind of goes through what the spirit realm is, what the physical realm is, which is a subset and created by the spirit realm. The physical realm was created as campuses of different levels of planets for us to go in order to learn and to always improve. Our goal is to become a pure spirit someday. If you want to know what a pure spirit is, Jesus Christ is a pure spirit. He came on the mission to earth to teach us what he could teach us at the time. His ministers have come to earth. Socrates, Buddha, other great people have come to earth. Lao Tzu have come to earth to Confucius is another one, have come to earth to help teach us the way. And that's why you see a lot of similarity between the different religions on earth. They all have something like the golden rule in common. So if you want to understand the magnificence of the spirit realm, we on earth we have blinders on, and we think that our scientists know everything, and that we see, oh, I'm only going to believe what material is there. All that material you see, that wall, everything, we're in a simulator. It's all false. And in fact, and then when we wear those 3D glasses and you see that, you're in a simulator within a simulator. It's very interesting. So for you to really become calm and loving and at peace with yourself, this is why I suggest you understand the environment you live in, why you're here, where you're going, and what is the purpose of why you have to go through this drama. Why me? I remember my daughter was little. Why me? Well, there's a good reason for it. You may not like the reason. It's mostly probably because you've done something to someone in the past, and now that's happening to you. In fact, I have a book on that called "The Problem Is the Solution," where 7 life complications sent to test and teach you. So anyway, I want to say God bless everyone, and I hope you have the great rest of this wonderful week between Christmas and New Year's, and have a safe New Year's. And I'll see you next. Well, I'll start live streaming again. I live stream Sunday, Mondays, and